Hello everyone, I'm Jake Fife and you're watching American Railroads Project. Today we're going to look at some early morning photos I took on October 26, 2025 in Goshen, Virginia of the historic Norfolk and Western J-Class Locomotive 611. Now these photos were taken just before 7 o'clock in the morning on the last day of the Shenandoah Valley Limited excursions, and I had ideally wanted to take night photos, very much in the vein of O Winston Link, but I arrived about 20 minutes too late for total darkness. But what I was able to do is take the photos into Adobe Lightroom, and I was able to take very early morning photos and turn them into night photos. So today we're going to look at some of those photos, and I'm going to explain why I took each one, what I was going for, and essentially how I did it. This first photo was as I was walking to the 611. As you can see, we've got the very bright work lights on the left that reflect and illuminate the engine, the water tender, the coal tender, as well as the Norfolk and Western tool car, and a little bit of Steam Railroading Institute car you see right to the right of the screen. So with this image, I really just wanted to show what the scene looked like and the true scale of everything. You know, we have the foreground bench, which kind of sets the place. We have the road, which is a nice little distinction between everything. We have the cars and equipment itself, which is the main draw. And then in the background, providing some depth, we have the trees. So with this shot, I originally exposed it for about 5 seconds because I wanted to have plenty of shadow detail while not completely blowing out the highlights being the clouds. But the second photo, which is the one that you see here, I decided that I more wanted to expose for the steam because with a steam locomotive, everyone wants to see the steam. And that I really didn't care too much about how the clouds looked because most of it was an overcast day. But the cloud formation just really wasn't interesting enough to keep it in and have it be its own thing. So I changed the exposure just slightly, and that's how we got the kind of gray slate that you see the sky being in this photo. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to do with this photo was I really wanted to bring out the contrast that you would see in like a J. Parker Lamb photo or an O Winston Link. So because I had a very well exposed image and pretty much a flat image, nothing really stood out. You know, instead of being stuck, I had so much room to play with. So I decided to darken the foreground a little bit aside from the bench. I lowered the exposure about a stop to a stop and a half. I think it was actually this one was a stop and a half. But I made sure to have a mask on the 611, the tenders, the tool car, and then a slight one, which means the intensity was decreased by about 10% compared to the others on the passenger car you see right in front of us, which is from the Steam Railroading Institute. Super, super cool. Because I knew, of course, everyone is instantly going to see the steam, you're going to see the light, and you're going to be looking for the 611 because at the end of the day, that is the main draw. So with this image, I really just wanted to bring that out. You know, I'm a huge fan of O Winston Link, and I do shoot a lot of film, mainly on medium format 6x6 to kind of really try and replicate his look, which film stocks of the 1950s, they had a low contrast, but you could add that back in either in development or you could do it with dodging and burning techniques in the darkroom. And if you look at some of the photos that I've posted on my Facebook page, you know, I do have that low contrast kind of 50s vibe. Even though I don't like to add a lot of green to it, it still evokes that kind of atmosphere that you would see from the 1950s. But with these photos, I wanted it to be dramatic. You know, think of his shot at like Rural Retreat or the Grotto's Fire Department. You know, those aren't low contrast scenes. You know, the blacks are black, the whites show up pure white. So that's really what I wanted to go with this image. And it's interesting, and I didn't fully capture it like Link would have, because where you have strict black and white, you know, I have black and white, but I do also have that middle gray. And that's something that I could have very easily moved out of the image through editing, but I decided to keep it in because I felt like it kind of had that natural separation, you know, that's pleasing to the human eye. So all the photos that we're talking about today are going to be photos that were taken in order. I just like the flow of that. This is one of those images that turned out a whole lot better than I thought it would. I could have done the exposure just a little bit because you do have the EST of Western that's completely blown out by the work light, but I actually think it adds a little splash of light and detail. It's not that full middle gray, dark gray, and then pure white. You do have that broken up a little bit. It was also very important for me that we bring out the darkness of the Tuscan red that Norfolk and Western Railroad was known for. And so I didn't do a whole lot of editing to the tool car here to make it appear that way. It was somewhat in camera looking like that. I only had to do slight adjustments. Now, throughout this video, you're going to hear me talk about making adjustments. I try to do as much as I can in camera. Number one, because it saves me time in the editing. And then number two, it really allows me to get to know the image, get to know the exposure. And honestly, I just feel better as a photographer being able to confidently do that every single time. I do shoot on a Nikon Z6 II. All these photos were taken with the only lens that I have for it at the time, which is a 35mm 1.8 S mount. Or not S mount, but S series lens. So this one kind of follows the same thing that the other one did compositionally, where you have the foreground, which this one I brightened up a little bit because I don't have a bright object like a bench to use as a foreground. And then of course I have the subject, and then I have the trees in the background. The trees are absolutely perfect, and with this being 5 days before Halloween, it just looks spooky and ominous, so I really wanted to keep that. I did change the exposure just a little bit to show some of the clad detail so that it's not just like a gray mess. You do have a bit more detail in it, but it's not a focal point for me. Of course, I want people to look at the tool car. And then it's also really cool because if you look at it in a series, you can see the Norfolk and Western water tender to the left. So your brain kind of is like, oh boy, I know what's coming. I know, of course, I want to see the big photo of, the steam engine. So finally, here it is, the moment you've all been waiting for, the Norfolk and Western J-Class 611, early in the morning, getting prepared for its run. So this is one that I didn't plan on taking when I was walking down. There was actually a different side shot that I was planning on taking. I ended up not taking that one simply because of all the people moving around. Like I said, this was a little bit before 7 o'clock in the morning, but I was surprised at how many photographers were already there. Now, usually with a 611, it feels like there's 10 million people around it. I think at this point, I only counted like 50 that were hanging around the Locomotive, which is still a lot, but a lot better. And there's just so many people that was in the other shot that it would have taken me 1,000 years to paint them out in Photoshop or Lightroom. I just decided to opt for this one. So talking about O Winston Link, he is a huge inspiration for this photo shoot and the way I decided to edit everything. And, Link was a huge fan of getting people, especially railroad employees, in his images. He did hardware shots, which is you just see the equipment, but he preferred the ones with the human aspect, the human story. And so even though this is a long exposure, so everything is blurred, I really like this one because you see the Virginia Scenic Railway and the not Norfolk and Western, but the Virginia Museum of Transportation volunteers hard at work. They're here at the crack of dawn preparing the locomotive, so everyone has a good day experiencing American history. So people are doing once-overs on the locomotive, they're cleaning things, they're polishing things, and actually in the foreground here, the two people talking, they're blurred. I really like that because it shows that sense of action. My focus point for this, all these were shot on manual focus, not autofocus. I decided to focus on the 611 number right there. I made sure that was in focus. So everything is probably just a little bit sharp, a little bit blurry actually, but I really like how this looks. Of course, the tone of the locomotive, it just hits right. And yeah, once you see the next one, you'll see exactly why I was excited to make this video. So this is it. This is surprisingly not the one I consider the best photo of the session, but it is probably a very close second. This is the front of the 611, but this is towards the end of where the public was allowed to go. And of course, we weren't allowed to cross the tracks. But very minimal people moving around, aside from railroad employees, which is exactly what I wanted, was perfectly fine with. I would have preferred the guy on the left, the one who's in front of the dark shrubs, to not be there. But I actually think he provides a little bit of color contrast, and recording this voiceover and looking at it, I actually really like him standing there because you really see the full scale of the size of the 611. Here's this guy who's probably like 6 foot tall, but he looks like he's 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall next to the 611. Once again, on the right side, you can see, if you zoom in on it, you can see all the cars going down. You can see how everything's set up. You can see all the people. And of course, everyone's blurry, which I think this is like a 5-second exposure, which is why the steam looks smooth like it does. But there's action. It is so cool just how so many people band together from different organizations to really make sure not just everything goes well, but that it goes off without a hitch. It is such amazing coordination, and I absolutely love this image. I did make sure that I saved some of the cloud detail because I did like how it kind of did this layer effect. If you look at it, it almost looks like ripples in the water, like if a rock falls in it or something, or like waves in the ocean. I do really like that. So I really like this because there's something to look at in pretty much every corner of the image, top, bottom, left, right, center. There's something that the eye can draw to. The last photo we're going to look at today is my favorite from the session. Everything I've said about the other images, my approach, my settings, the, O Winston Link inspiration, I felt like everything culminated in this image. There was another one that I took a little bit before, but a family got in the way taking photos, which, it was annoying, but I understand it's one of those things that's going to happen when you do something, especially with the 611's celebrity status. You're going to have people not being aware of their surroundings, seeing that, someone's taking a photo. So as soon as they got out of the way, I quickly snapped this image, and I'm glad I did. You've got the action, you've got the steam. This was actually seconds after it had shot up the black smoke from its main stack, and I caught a little bit of it, but it had switched back to the white/gray that it was emitting. It was just so freaking cool to see it. And then you've got the white smoke in the foreground of it that provides a little bit of depth to it. You've got the people moving around, once again showing its sense of scale. You've got a little bit of light streaks, which I love doing night photography, so that's something I absolutely love too. You've got the trees and the shrubs on the left that's providing that depth to it, and even a little bit of grayscale, which I think makes the 611 look even more imposing. This is just one of those images that through and through I am super proud of. I shoot everything in RAW at the highest possible quality my Nikon can do, so I can even zoom in on like the headlight and the number plate there, and it looks tack sharp. Just super lucky. There was a lot of planning that went into this, a lot of double checking settings. I think I took 2 photos. This was the first one. The second one was a slightly longer exposure, but I was super happy with this one. The other one, the clouds just didn't hit the same, and also the steam rising out of the locomotive and the side of it looked a little too clean. It all started to like blend together. I like this one because they kept the cloud detail, but it also let the smokestack be different. I really like this. This is one of those I've shown to several different people, posted online, and I've actually had, I think it's like, I've counted 10 people so far have asked, where they can get a print of this. So I'm just really happy with this image. So yeah, it's one of those things that you can do all sorts of planning, but when you actually get there, you feel nervous because, things don't always go the way you plan it, and then you feel like it's all for naught. It's not going to turn out the way you want. This was daylight by the time that I was shooting this. This is probably 7:20, 7:30, because I was, stopping and talking to people. I wasn't in like a huge rush, so it was very important to keep the colors consistent. And if you go back to the start of the video, like the first 2 photos, you can see that the lighting is different, but I think this was edited enough to where you could pass it off as like an early night photo.